What is up, everybody? This is Ryan here. We have a very special guest. I have Paul Statham, who is the founder of Condeco Software. Check this out. He went from 0 to 10 million in 10 years, Bootstrapped. Then from 10 million to 60 million. That's 60 million in 6 years. And then from 60 million to 100 million in 18 months. This man drops some absolute gold you are going to want to check out in this episode. And he talks about his whole journey on the way, what he learned, and what you can avoid. Check it out. Welcome everybody to the Scale Up Show. This is your host, Ryan Staley, and I have a very special guest with me on today. I have Paul Statham. Paul is the founder and CEO of Condeco Software. Condeco Software is a leader in workspace management and resource scheduling software. They've won a Stevie Award in 2021 for the most valuable technical innovation to help address the post-COVID workplace. Some really wild things. They're about 100 million in revenue and grew from 60 million to 100 million in 18 months. Paul, happy to have you on the show, man. Welcome.
Yeah, it's great to be here. Thank you for having me on.
Yeah, I really enjoyed our conversation before we started. So I want to bring everyone up to speed on where you're at in terms of your journey. I know I gave a quick teaser to it, but share this with me. So I'm going to do a quick revenue rundown. So where are you at in terms of ARR?
We're now, just this year, we're going to be reporting just around the 100 million mark.
Fantastic. And we just spoke about this briefly, but what were your jumps from, how long did it take you to get to 10, how long did it take you to get to 60, and then how long did it take you to get to 100? Because this is fascinating.
Yeah, it's an interesting story. We launched the Condeco product back in 2005, and it took us about 10 years to get to 10 million of revenue, which is always that struggle when you're bootstrapped. Then we took on our first Series A investment, and we, over the 5 years, got that up to the 60 mark. And then last year, our initial Series A exited, and we took on a significant investment from Thoma Bravo. And in the last year, through to the end of this year, we'll accelerate to 100. So yeah, it's amazing how quickly, with the financial clout plus the product acceleration, how you can scale good technology businesses, and it's a great ride.
Yeah, it's fantastic. So we're definitely going to dig into that. What's your primary go-to-market?
We tend to work on the enterprise space. We work through the traditional route of we're well known, we're market leaders, so we have a traditional sales and marketing org that runs around the world. We've got about 50 quota carriers that operate through 5 or 6 offices around, as I say, around the world. And what we basically do is work with the enterprise clients to right-size their workspace scheduling. It's a very complex task, getting people into offices and at the right space, getting the right amount of space that you need, understanding the capacity. It's a fine technical art to make it happen, and unfortunately, we've got the product to make it work.
Yeah, I would say so with that type of growth. So I know you mentioned you have about 50 quota carriers. How large is your team?
The whole team is about just over 550 people around the world, and we have in-house engineering. Got a great engineering team in India, which we've built up to around just under the 200 mark, who have been nailing it for many years. Great guys. About 100 people in the sales org, about 100 people in the customer org, and then you've got the marketing and finance and all the rest of it.
Okay, and then can you give us just a little bit, I know you mentioned high level on your solution, can you give us the primary problem that it solves?
Yeah, the primary problem is people coming into a workspace want to find the best place that they can work and be productive. They want to find their colleagues, they want to book scheduling for conference rooms, they want to find quiet space, they want to find breakout space, they want the services that go with that space to be available when they need them. And that's a whole Rubik's Cube of life of trying to work out, when you're talking about customers that have got 100,000 employees and maybe a few hundred, if not a few thousand locations, getting that right-sized even before the pandemic was a real challenge. You probably have been in many buildings where people will moan about, you can never find a meeting space in this building. or you can never find a colleague in this building if you're working flexibly. And we make sense of what is quite a complex problem. And you mentioned the pandemic. I think when you went into the challenges, obviously during the pandemic, we pivoted the product slightly to move into additional security for getting people into work in a very safe environment. And it was one of the things that was noted on the award, is that we were getting people back into offices within the guidelines of the requirements during that time. But subsequently, when offices aren't as busy as they were, putting technology in place to make sure that when you come in, you can find your colleagues and your colleagues are available to communicate with you, has become one of the biggest business challenges of the post-pandemic era.
Yeah, I could see that. Are you doing? Is this just physical office space, or are you doing it virtually as well?
No, we do physical office. We don't just do tenant-owned space, company-owned space. We will do third space. So if you want to go and book a WeWork, or you want to go and book
Okay.
another property, you can do that in the system. You can mark that you're working remotely so that your colleagues won't try and find you. You can set up a team so that when you do come into the office, your colleagues are notified that you're in, so they may or may not want to come in, depending whether you're liked or not. So the principle of one of the big challenges in, as I say, in the post-pandemic world is how do you bring people back together to collaborate again and to interact and to learn. We spend a lot of time behind video conferencing, and it's taken some of the culture out of businesses. And I think we're hearing this from, again, another interesting fact is probably, back in 2019, we were talking to facilities managers and real estate owners and operators. We're now talking to HR teams, we're talking to C-suite, we're talking to the senior players to help solve a business critical issue, as opposed to just managing property. So the employee-centric, the employee is now at the center of, how do we operate our buildings? It's not about operating a building anymore. It's about operating a space that people want to come into and actually collaborate in.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot to unpack there. So let's go back to that, because I know you mentioned that you were bootstrapped to 10 million and then funded. So I definitely want to get into the problems that your solution solves, because I see just mountains and piles of problems, especially with everything that's happened. And so, I guess, like, obviously I know if you're bootstrapped or funded, but walk me through the journey, and this will kind of get into your story of, like, okay, it took you 10 years to get to 10 million. Why did you decide to bootstrap and do it that way to get to 10 million?
I left school at 16, set up my own business, built that in electronic security, had a really cool product that was unique in that space, built that up to a multi-million-dollar business, and exited that with a sizable chunk of change, and then reinvested that into software technology and software development. And so bootstrapping came with a fairly big seed funding. We pumped, I think, $1.5 million into the bank account to get going, which we were fortunate. We'd earned it, but we had it. We didn't need to go and raise seed funding. But we had a great product idea. We'd been consulting in the space for a while around scheduling and how you can schedule at enterprise scale. There were lots of small scheduling, localized applications, but enterprise scale was, I'm sure is a different, whole different world. So we built an enterprise scale that would go to 100,000 desks and 200,000 people in multiple languages, in multiple time zones, which in 2005 was quite going. It was out there. It was totally off the charts. We launched it. Interesting story. We launched it in the spring of 2005. No references, no customers, no one using it, and we were launching it to enterprise, who naturally are skeptical about products that have just come to market. Didn't sell a product until the summer of 2005, which was a bit of a nail-biting moment. Closed our first deal in September the 2nd. I can tell you to this day, 2005, we sold our first system to a law firm in London. They loved it. Became a reference site for us. Next site I think we closed was Diageo, did a global deal. Next one was Barclays, did a
Wow.
global deal. Next one was Shell, did a global deal. So suddenly the referenceability went off the charts, and the product was just, we invented alchemy. We were making what was an impossible problem of finding space on an enterprise scale possible for individuals as well as managed or self-managed. It's a cool journey, but bootstrapped. You're focused on your own problems. You sometimes don't just see the scale at which you can grow to. We dominated the UK space quite quickly. We set off in the UK. We then moved into the European and Asia space, and eventually moved into the US. And the US is the most difficult market to break when you're not an American-based business to start with, which is why I now live in the US. Because if you want to make America work, you've got to be based over here. You just realise how amazing the market is. But it was enjoyable, and when you're growing, at a sizable rate, growing to 10 million, and I look back now and it's like, oh, it's only 10 million, but 10 million is a heck of a lot of money to be growing at when you're running it yourself and you own it yourself with a few early founding employees. We had a great team. We were running 30, 40, 50 people. Really enjoyable. Best moments, bootstrap businesses with the 30 people that like and trust. You win together, you lose together. It was a great moment. But then we knew we had to scale. We wanted to buy a couple of businesses. There was one in Germany, one in America. We were moving entirely to the cloud and to SaaS. Therefore, we needed to fund that movement from perpetual license and on-prem into cloud and SaaS, both product-wise, and the SaaS curve is brutal. I think most people now start off in SaaS, but if you didn't, anyone that's been through the SaaS curve will tell you it's a brutal moment when you give up the great sell a piece of software for $200,000 and just bank it and live off that until the next one was a great thing. When you sell a $200,000 software and you're now selling it for $5,000 a month, that kind of hurts, as you well know.
Oh, yeah.
So we went out and raised some money with Highland Europe, great business for that size of business. Pumped in $15 million and allowed me and my executive team to really spread our wings, to take a few bets that we wouldn't be able to bet on, buy these two businesses, really focus on scale and the cloud. And we nailed it. We 5x their investment in 5 years. They expected 4. They asked for 3. I said we'd give them 4, and we gave them 5, and we're still very good friends with the guys there. So we parted company, and Tom Bravo took over the reins as principal investor in the business.
That's fantastic. I mean, that's a great story. So how long did it take you going back? How long did it take you to go from 0 to 1?
Now you are going back. 0 to 1 probably took us the first 3 years to get from 0 to 1. It took us to get to revenue. It took us 6 months. So, that's the problem. And, we've been pumping money in for a year beforehand. So it took us 18. So we go -1, if you like, from launch. It took us 18 months to get to revenue, and probably the best part of $1 million+. And that first, I think the first license, I think, was about $30,000. And that was the sweetest $30,000 I've ever earned in my life. It was great.
Yeah, that's okay. So that's fantastic. And like, the cool thing is at that point you did it before, but when you're going through that, let's say that 18-month period, or actually the 3 years to get to $1 million, did you doubt yourself? Did you have a hard time believing, sometimes seeing the path where you think things would take off? And like, what was it like emotionally going through that?
Yeah, it's interesting. I'm. You probably would have guessed I'm a pint half full sort of person, so I'm not a lot bothers me. But it was an interesting moment. A quick story of my CMO, who was started as our head of marketing, a lady called Linda Lowe. Sat down with her and she said, "Look, Paul, I don't think this market's ready for where we're going. I think the maximum we can ever look to get is 5,000 a month of sales would be off the chart." And I said to her, we can do that a day within a year.
Right.
And she said, really? I said, yeah, let's go for it because it's out there. And this was in the early days. And within a year, we were doing that and some. And so I think you do doubt yourself, and you do think, the first order is the nicest, and then once large companies, enterprise companies, lean into you and use your product, and you see the change, and then they feedback about how you can improve your product. We now call it customer success. When you're bootstrapped and you're 5 or 10 people, that's just customers telling you what didn't work or what did work. We give it names now. But talking to the customers, our first 50 customers helped us build the best product on the planet because they were the biggest companies on the planet. When, as I say, companies like Shell and Standard Chartered, Diageo or NBC tell you that things should go slightly differently, and it would help if you just tweaked it here and tweaked it there. You listen. Our head of product now, our CPO now, Peter Otto, again one of the founders who started in the business from the get-go. Great guy who's got a really good feel for the feedback that we get from customers, and we take that feedback and we immediately roll it into the roadmap, and we scale. So our customers are what made us great and what made the product what it is today.
I can see that. Definitely. I mean, that's top 50 customers. That's huge. And it's really interesting that you went from a law firm to Fortune 1000 company. That's a pretty big jump. Really big jump, as a matter of fact. So the thing that's interesting too is because we went through that when we got Amazon as a customer. They were our biggest customer, Whole Foods, Amazon, right? And where the really awesome thing about making those big jumps is those customers will push you to grow, and they'll give you the exact template and roadmap that other people want. They just haven't been able to explain it, right? So it allows you to make leaps and jumps ahead of where you're at. At least that's what I've experienced. Would you say the same thing?
100%. They'll tell you where you need to be. They'll tell you what you need to be. They'll tell you how you need to act, and that's how you learn and grow. And in another war story, Diageo came to us and said, "Look, we're opening a new office in Sydney. We need your product. It's not out there at the moment, so you need to look after APAC." So I spoke to one of our engineers at the time, who's still with us, a guy called Tom Chambers, and said, "Tom." He was only a youngster in his early 20s. So I need you to go to Australia. He said, "How long for?" I said, "I don't know, as long as it takes." So he goes, "All right, boss, I'll do it." Jumped on a plane, went, worked with the guys in Sydney, built the business, then stayed, set up our APAC office, stayed out there for 8 years. He's now our VP of sales in the UK. So, these are the stories that just are the culture of a business. And interestingly, Diageo is still a client, Barclays is still a client, the law firm, Smith & Williamson, accountancy firm, sorry, is still a client. These are still clients of ours 15 years on, and they're still the rock that builds Barclays, as I mentioned, still out there globally booking thousands, if not millions of bookings a year through the Condeco system.
So now that you've worked with really large enterprise companies, what's the number one thing that led your organization to constantly acquire Fortune 1000 customers?
I think that the technology that understanding their pain and making sure your technology answers that pain, it has been why our customers come to us. Putting why we're different from real estate companies and IWMS systems and other people in the space, and why we've grown, particularly during COVID, at such a rate, is that we put the employee at the center of everything that we do. We make sure, we obviously are respectful for our clients and who pay our bills, but it's their employees that use our product. And if their employees need to find a desk, find their colleagues, book a space, and do that multiple times every day, we got to make sure they can do that in a safe and controlled environment. We provide the certainty for those employees that when they come to the office that they've got a space. And nowadays, when allocated desking is now a thing of the past, having that employee certainty is a real boost for our customers. So our customers understand that by us we obviously care about what our customers think and do, but by thinking how their employees, getting down below, so we do customer plus one. Now, what do their employees think about? it changes the way that our product team think and our customer team think, and it really helps drive us to be unique in our space.
And I've never heard that customer plus one. So what you mean by that is basically like, instead of just looking at it as the general customer, also getting down to the individual level of the people to understand their true needs.
Our customer's customer, which is
Yeah.
what you probably call it. It's customer.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. Yeah. Love
Customer,
that.
what you would call it in a normal sales term is a customer. It's like, yeah, it says the customer
Okay.
plus one.
Customer plus. I like customer plus one better, man.
Yeah, well, there you
Maybe.
go. It's
Yeah.
an
I like
internal
it.
term. I haven't patented it, so you can use it. So.
You're a friend of the pod, so we won't take any patentable items from you, Paul. We'll leverage it, and if we do, we'll footnote that Paul mentioned it in episode, I don't know, 170 plus of the show. So, um, okay, so a lot of questions are coming in my head as we're going through this. So really good things. How about like, so growing from, let's say, 10 to 60 million, like what did you need to do from a revenue perspective to make that happen? Like, and when I say revenue, don't like, and I'm not going to again this, but don't say the product, right? Just like, what did you need to do on the sales and marketing side to go from 10 to 60?
We had to scale. We had to scale the whole team. You know, you have to bring in line management. You have to bring in, and it's difficult, to let go and have to pass down responsibilities to different leaders. But we had to build a strong C-suite. We had to build a strong finance team, strong marketing team, and you had to build a sales squad. Selling is an art form, and we brought in a CSO who then brought in the sales VPs, and we did bring in we promoted a lot from within, because a lot of people, you need that, but there was also, you do need to bring people in to help you scale. And so making sure you've got capacity to manage inbound, which is always difficult scaling. But then once you've done that, making sure that the inbound is coming in enough, so you need to keep pumping into marketing, and this is selling. But it's one of the most challenging parts of keeping the customer feedback, not getting ahead of yourself, and I think, and having enough faith. And interesting, when we were with Highland funding us, the board meetings, the first few board meetings were always the most challenging, when you've just got taken on investment. But they were always talking, how can we help you? How can we help you? And it was like, okay, we want to scale. So they helped pick the right people. We swapped out our CFO. They said, look, to get to the next level, you've got a 0 to 10 million CFO. And they brought us in a CFO that could take us to 100 million, who's obviously still with us today. And they brought in the right leadership controls, which is good, and that they really did act as a help and support for me. I was able to bounce ideas off them, and they helped me scale, and then scale my team, and it cascades down from there. But we also grew internationally. The UK was our primary focus, because that's where we started the business. We bought a company in the US, which helped us here. We bought a company in Germany, which really helped us scale into Europe, because that's never an easy place to get with languages and culture. And our clients, interestingly, took us into APAC. So the customers, because they're so large, want you to be multinational yourself. So us opening offices, which is expensive, it's never easy opening remote offices. But that was the catalyst, if you like. Our customers saying, look, we need to buy from you in other places. That's the catalyst for you to say, look, we need more money we burnt a lot of money growing that sales org and growing that company. Unfortunately, managed to scale to the fact that obviously we're now profitable. But that dip where you're bootstrapped and you have to be profitable, because you just have to. Then your Series A, where for the first time in my life since I was 16, I was losing money and not posting profits at the end of the year. That's probably the most nerve-wracking time, when I'm not an entrepreneur that's used to going to a VC and taking loads of money and burning through it. I take every dollar like it's my own. And so when you take on funding, I think you have to just sometimes allow that to happen. And they coached us through the fact, look, we expect this to happen. We expect you to burn some cash. And as I say, they got a great return for it.
Yeah, it sounds like it. Uh, so what would you say is, because that's one of usually the hardest things that I've seen organizations struggle with is scaling an enterprise sales motion. So what was your single biggest challenge when you're doing that right now in terms of scaling an enterprise sales motion?
It's getting all of the parts of the business to work simultaneously so that you scale together. Unfortunately, you tend to focus as leadership teams. You tend to focus on one thing at a time, building a product when you're getting going, then selling it, and you put all your energy into selling it, and then you end up scaling it, and then you end up employing people. Then you go back and have to rework the product, pay back some of that technical debt. Then you've got that technical debt repaid and you've got to go and sell it again so you go through these cycles, and companies go through cycles, and I don't think it's just us. I've talked to many CEOs, and everyone has the same challenge, and I think constantly, as I class it, as spinning the plates, making sure you put enough energy into each team that no one gets left behind, and that, hence the word team. You've got to make sure that everyone feels that they've got enough focus and investment from the board and from the C-suite to scale themselves and move forward. And empowerment, you've got to allow people. We don't. I'm not a micromanager. You've got to let people just do it and see what happens. So empowering people and not and expecting sometimes things won't work right. And when they don't work, just fix it. Don't moan about it. Don't bang the desks. Just fix it. It's pivot, make changes, take risks. I'm a great believer in take a risk and pivot. If it doesn't work, don't sit and navel gaze about it forever. You won't get anywhere with it. Let's just jump in. Controlled risk, give it a go. If it's not working, change. There's nothing wrong with saying that didn't work. We wouldn't get anywhere in life if everything was proven before we did it. So that take a risk, get ready to pivot. Always have a plan B. Great. These are all standard stuff, but it's really important. Always have a plan B. And if you can, have a plan C, because, things come from left field and you think, wow, wasn't expecting that. When COVID hit, we didn't have a plan for COVID, but, we'd been doing hoteling for a long time. But probably only 10% of our market was investing in the hoteling market. 80-20 was towards conferencing. We knew we were strong in hoteling, but it wasn't a huge need because most people had allocated desking. But suddenly we sat down with the product team and the sales team, and in fact the board got involved in this, and said, look, I said, look guys, hoteling is going to be taking over. People are coming back. They're not worried about meeting rooms at the moment. They're worried about getting back in. So we took 6 to 8 weeks to pivot our whole approach and repurpose. Didn't change the product. Product was always doing it, but repurpose the approach. So look, guys, if you're coming back in, make sure that you book a desk before you come back so that we can make sure it's clean, etc., etc. So that pivot is even when you're at scale at 60 million, 80 million, being able to make quick changes and the team below you are able to understand and have faith that change may sound a bit sort of screwy, but give it a go because there's probably some logic there. That's probably been the most, and that's the fun moments, if you like, of even at scale being able to bring about innovation and change through a little bit of taking risk. And no one makes innovation and change without taking some risk.
Right. That's a lot of. I'm gonna have to re-listen to that. A lot of gold you just dropped right there, diamonds, whatever you want to call it, but some good stuff right there. And we did that one time where we basically, once we moved up market into the enterprise space and started getting bigger and bigger deals, we just refined our messaging and tweaked a few things, and the market responded really, really well to it. And so then we just leaned into that even more, and then just poured gas on the fire, and then just kept growing and growing and growing. So I could totally see what you're talking about, and you're leveraging the trend of what's happening with the market. So that's awesome.
Yeah.
So Paul, what would you say is like the number one thing that you think you're amazing at, that you could give advice for in terms of growing someone who's trying to grow their company, whether they're in that initial bootstrap phase or whether they're approaching where you're at now? What's the number one single best thing you could give them in terms of advice and growing revenue?
Wow. I think to always be ready to listen to the market and the customers and to innovate to what they want. I think that's probably been my strong point throughout my entire working life. And the market will always tell you what it wants. Making sure you deliver what it wants and then exceeding expectations is the art form. And being able to technically deliver, on listening, finding out what the problems are, and then answering those problems are from a product company are the best ways of making that happen. It's something we're really good at Condeco. And I do think that taking limited risks is something I'm really good at. And I think that probably comes from never actually having a job, never being on a job interview or I've never reported to anyone apart from myself. So taking risks are easy when I have to put my head on my pillow and answer to myself. And I can be quite a stern taskmaster at times, but taking risks, calculated risks, because that's how you can scale quicker, is probably what I would say is my specialism, and that doesn't probably bode well for my fellow board, but I think they understand what I mean by that. We take calculated risks and we lean into them and we make sure they turn into successes.
So what's your mental model for that though? Like, how do you evaluate it? Is there like 3, 4, 5 steps that you take when you're looking at like, okay, like what's the opportunity? What's the problems it's going to create? What's the outcomes? Like, how do you kind of walk through that, like in a real quick, concise way? Otherwise, I mean, I could talk with you about this for hours, but I know we don't have that time. So
no, I employ really clever people. Simple fact, these guys are much cleverer than me. I just listen to them and I know which one of their thought track is one I can grab and turn into a nugget of gold. So have the right team around you that are constantly evaluating, listen to what they've got to say, discount 80% of it, take the 20% that you can really make work and then nail it. That's what I'd say in a concise moment.
You do that with the customers as well? Like,
and we tend to listen to a little bit wider customers thing. My product team would tend to go probably 60-40. There is 40% of what comes our way we have to ignore because it's crazy. But it's very special to those guys. But there's a hardcore about 60% of what you're being told through customer success and product that is really, really gold dust. It's what forms the business.
Okay. So now that you are on the other side of it, right? What's advice would you give to yourself, your bootstrap self, now that you're closing in on $100 million in revenue, you're earlier in the process, you're bootstrapping, you're sub 10 million, 10 million. What advice would you give yourself knowing what you know now?
Do the Series A 2 years earlier, or maybe
really?
4 years. Yeah, I'd have done it earlier. That's it's my only regret is not having met the guys from Highland before. And Highland reached out to us, so it was great and should have met them before. But definitely wouldn't start off with VC money. I don't think you really. It's great, and there's a lot of clever people make billions of dollars out of it, but it's not the way that I work. I need to understand things before I take on any money. But going in, that was probably, looking in hindsight, that was one mistake. And the other one, if you're an international business, is move to America and make sure you corner the US market before you go into other markets. We were late into the US market, and it probably, if we'd have come in a couple of years earlier, would have accelerated even quicker. It's an amazing market here. As I say, and moving myself and bringing my wife over and really focusing on the market, was a pivotal point in the business.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, you shared some amazing things today, and I just love your perspective on it and your candor, and just your journey is really, really interesting and fascinating. So we're up on time though. So where can people find you? Where can they find out more about Condeco? And then we'll wrap things up.
Okay, well, Condeco is at www.condecosoftware.com. I'm on LinkedIn, Paul Statham, and I say you can contact me through LinkedIn is the best way, or through the company.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your insights and sharing your wisdom. It was awesome having you on the show, and then I look forward to seeing you in the next episode.
Great, really enjoyed it. Thank you.